The night shimmered like a dream come true. The grand ballroom of Miller Technologies glowed under crystal chandeliers, filled with laughter, flashing cameras, and the soft notes of a live orchestra. Grace Miller, 32, the proud CEO of one of the fastest-growing tech companies in the country, stood at the center of it all, beautiful, pregnant, and blissfully unaware that this night would almost end her life. Her husband, Andrew Miller, handsome and charming, stood beside her with a practiced smile. The world saw a devoted couple, a symbol of love and power. He gently touched her shoulder as she greeted investors, his hand steady, high. Across the room, Vanessa Brown, Grace's personal assistant and Andrew's secret lover, watched the scene unfold. She looked stunning in a crimson gown, her lips curling into a faint, knowing smile. No one noticed the quick glance she exchanged with an... In the far corner stood Mr. Adrian Bennett, a silver-haired Bill. Grace took the stage to deliver her speech. The crowd cheered as she lifted her glass. Tonight isn't just about success. She saw. Applause thundered. Cameras flashed. Andrew leaned close, whispering, "To us, my love," and poured her a fresh glass of champagne, his fingers discreetly releasing a few drops from a tiny... Grace smiled, tired but happy, and took a sip. The taste was slightly bitter, but she dismissed it as nerves. The music swelled again. Couples danced. Andrew kissed her hand in front of everyone, and for a moment, then it happened. The glass slipped from her trembling hand, crashing against the marble floor. Her vision blurred. Her heart pounded wildly. Guests gasped as Grace clutched her belly, eyes wide with terror. "Andrew, something's wrong," she whispered. He caught her arm, feigning panic. "Someone call a doctor." Blood began to soak through the satin of her silver dress, staining it crimson. The crowd erupted into chaos. From the corner, Mr. Bennett surged forward, pushing through the sea of stunned faces. He dropped to his knees beside her. "Stay with me, Grace," he commanded. "You're going to be all right." Andrew froze, shock etched across his face, not for her suffering, but for the unraveling of his plan. Paramedics rushed in. Bennett refused to leave her side, his tailored suit stained with her blood. As they carried Grace toward the ambulance, her hand reached weakly for his. Their eyes met for the first time, not as business partners, but as two souls colliding in a moment that would change everything. And in that instant, as the sirens wailed into the night, her story of betrayal, survival, and unexpected love truly began. The night after the gala, the city lights shimmered across the skyline like scattered diamonds. Inside their luxurious penthouse, Grace sat by the window, wrapped in a silk robe, one hand resting on her pregnant belly. She felt drained, dizzy, and strangely hollow. The doctors had told her she was dehydrated, but something inside her whispered that it was more than that. Andrew entered the room carrying 2 glasses of fresh orange juice. His expression was tender, the perfect image of a caring husband. "You scared everyone last night," he said softly, handing her a glass. "You need rest, sweetheart." Grace forced a smile. "I don't even remember collapsing. Everything just went black." Andrew sat beside her, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You've been overworking again. Stress isn't good for the baby." His tone was gentle, but his eyes were calculating. She sipped the juice slowly. It tasted different, slightly metallic. She frowned. "Did you change the brand?" He smiled easily. "It's imported. I thought you deserved something better." She nodded, though her mind began to drift. Images from the gala flashed in her head. Vanessa's cold stare, Andrew's whisper, the faint bitterness in her champagne. Her hand trembled slightly. Meanwhile, across town, Mr. Adrian Bennett sat in his study, replaying the footage from the gala security cameras he had quietly requested. The video showed Andrew's hand hovering suspiciously over Grace's glass before her collapse. Bennett's gut tightened. "You bastard," he muttered under his breath. He picked up his phone, hesitated, then decided to wait. He needed proof, undeniable proof. Back in the penthouse, Grace set down the juice and stood. "I think I'll lie down for a bit." Andrew nodded, hiding the smirk tugging at his lips. As soon as she turned away, he slipped his phone from his pocket and typed a quick message. "Andrew, It's working. She's weak. Vanessa, be patient. It needs time. After this, we're free. He deleted the thread instantly. In the bedroom, Grace lay awake, her heart pounding. Her body felt heavy, but her mind raced. She couldn't shake the unease crawling under her skin. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Andrew's smile at the gala, too smooth, too rehearsed. A sharp pain shot through her stomach. She gasped, clutching her belly. Not again. Andrew rushed in, pretending concern. What's wrong? She could barely speak. It hurts. Andrew, call the doctor. He nodded but didn't move right away. For a moment, his mask slipped. His eyes turned cold, detached like a man watching a plan unfold. Then, just as quickly, he snapped back into character. Hold on, baby, I'm calling now. He dialed, voice trembling with fake panic. But deep inside, he was already calculating the inheritance, the company, the freedom. As Grace's vision blurred again, one thought flashed in her mind. Something is terribly wrong. Someone wants me gone. And far across the city, Mr. Bennett closed his laptop and whispered, I won't let her die, because sometimes fate sends a stranger to save the one about to lose everything. Rain fell softly against the tall windows of Adrian Bennett's penthouse office. The billionaire sat alone, the city glowing beneath him like a sea of lights. But his thoughts were far from business tonight. The image of Grace Miller collapsing in a pool of her own blood at the gala haunted him. He had seen many things in his long life, but not that kind of fear, the kind that only an innocent woman feels when betrayal comes from someone she loves. He leaned back, replaying the security footage for the 5th time. There it was again, Andrew's hand hovering near Grace's drink, his body shielding the movement from everyone's view. A flicker of guilt flashed across Vanessa Brown's face right after Grace took her sip. Adrian paused the video. His jaw tightened. Poison, he whispered to himself. The next morning, Grace woke in her hospital bed, weak and pale. Her hand instinctively moved to her belly. The baby was safe for now. She didn't know how close she had come to dying. Andrew sat beside her, pretending exhaustion. You scared me, Grace, he said softly. I thought I was going to lose you both. She managed a faint smile. What happened? They said it was stress, he replied quickly. You pushed yourself too hard again. He brushed his thumb against her wrist, eyes full of fake tenderness. But Grace noticed something off. The way he avoided her gaze. The way his jaw tightened whenever the doctor mentioned toxicology tests. Something inside her shifted a tiny spark of doubt that wouldn't go away. Later that day, as Andrew stepped out to answer a call, the door opened quietly. Mr. Bennett entered, his presence calm but commanding. Grace blinked in surprise. Mr. Bennett? He smiled gently. I'm sorry for coming unannounced. I just wanted to see how you were doing. Her voice trembled. Better, I think. They said it wasn't serious. His expression darkened. I saw the video, Grace. What happened to you wasn't an accident. Her breath caught. What do you mean? He glanced toward the hallway, then lowered his voice. Your husband's behavior. It wasn't right. I don't want to alarm you, but I believe someone tampered with your drink. Tears welled in her eyes. No. Andrew would never. Would he? Bennett interrupted gently. You've built an empire, Grace, and power attracts greed. Don't ignore what your instincts are telling you. Grace looked away, heart pounding. Everything inside her screamed denial, yet a dark seed of truth began to grow. Andrew returned a moment later, his smile fading as he saw Bennett. Adrian? He greeted stiffly. Didn't expect to see you here. I was concerned for Grace, Bennett said evenly. She's a remarkable woman. You're lucky to have her. Andrew's eyes narrowed just slightly. I know, Bennett nodded politely, but as he left, his mind was already made up. He would protect Grace, whether she believed him or not, because somewhere between suspicion and compassion, a powerful man had just decided to become her guardian. The storm outside mirrored the chaos within Grace's heart. That night, She returned home from the hospital, under Andrew's insistence. "You'll rest better here," he said, guiding her gently inside their penthouse. The air was cold, heavy with silence. Grace hesitated. Something about the house, the same house she had once loved, now felt different, hollow, dangerous. Andrew cooked dinner himself, insisting the staff take the evening off. "Just us," he smiled. Like old times. She tried to eat, but her body refused. The smell of the soup made her stomach twist. Andrew noticed. "You don't trust me anymore," he teased lightly, though his voice carried a hint of irritation. Grace looked up slowly. "I didn't say that," he chuckled, pouring wine into her glass. "Then prove it. Drink with me." Her hand froze. The image of the gala flashed again, the bitter taste, the dizziness, the fall. Her pulse quickened. "I shouldn't," she said softly. The doctor said you're fine," he interrupted sharply, pushing the glass closer. "You owe me a toast. To our new beginning." Before she could respond, her phone buzzed. A message appeared on the screen. Unknown number. "Don't drink. Trust your instincts. A.B." Her breath caught. Adrian Bennett. Andrew frowned. "Who is it?" "No one," she whispered, setting the phone face down. She reached for the glass, but only pretended to sip. "To us," she murmured. Andrew smiled, satisfied, and drank deeply from his own glass. Grace excused herself moments later, claiming exhaustion. As soon as she stepped into the hallway, tears welled in her eyes. Her hands trembled. She didn't want to believe it, but every sign pointed toward Andrew's betrayal. In the living room, Andrew received a call from Vanessa. "Is it done?" she asked. He smirked. "Soon. She's too suspicious now. I'll need to adjust the plan." "Be careful," Vanessa whispered. "Bennett's watching." Andrew's face darkened. "Let him. He won't find proof." He ended the call and turned toward the dining table, only to see Grace's untouched wine. His smile vanished. "You clever woman," he muttered. Upstairs, Grace clutched her stomach. A sharp pain shot through her side, sudden and fierce. She gasped, stumbling toward the bed. Blood, dark red, staining her white nightgown. Panic gripped her throat. "No, please, no." Andrew heard the thud and rushed upstairs. "Grace!" he shouted, bursting into the room. The sight stopped him cold. Grace on the floor, her body trembling, blood spreading fast. For a moment, his mask slipped completely. No fear, no sorrow, only annoyance. "Damn it," he hissed under his breath. She looked up at him, eyes wide with shock. "You did this," she whispered weakly. He knelt beside her, forcing a gentle tone. "Don't talk like that. I'll get help." But his hands never reached for the phone. Downstairs, the front door burst open. Adrian Bennett, flanked by emergency responders, stormed in. He had tracked Grace's location through her message. When Andrew turned, Bennett's fist connected with his jaw. "You tried to kill her." As paramedics lifted Grace, Andrew stood frozen, blood on his hands, both hers and his own. And in that moment, his perfect mask shattered, revealing the monster beneath. The flashing red and blue lights painted streaks across the rain-soaked streets as the ambulance tore through the night. Inside, Grace lay unconscious, her skin ghostly pale, her pulse faint. Blood soaked through the sheets wrapped around her. A paramedic shouted, "She's losing too much. Pressure's dropping." Adrian Bennett sat beside her, gripping her cold hand, refusing to look away. "Stay with me, Grace," he whispered, voice trembling with a mix of fear and fury. "You're stronger than this." The doctor inside the ambulance looked up. "Sir, are you family?" Adrian's voice hardened. "Tonight, I am." When they arrived at the hospital, chaos erupted. Nurses rushed her into the emergency room. "She's pregnant. 7 months," someone shouted. The doors slammed shut, leaving Adrian alone in the hallway, drenched and shaking. He sank onto a bench, his mind spinning. How could a man do that to his own wife? He clenched his fists, jaw tight. Andrew Miller's name burned like poison in his thoughts. Hours passed like lifetimes. Rain continued to fall outside, the only sound breaking the silence. Then the double doors opened. A doctor approached, his face solemn. "She's alive," he said finally. Adrian exhaled sharply, the tension leaving his shoulders. "But she lost a lot of blood. We nearly lost her and the baby both. Whoever called when they did saved them." Adrian nodded slowly, eyes glassy. "I called." The doctor placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "She'll need time to recover." Emotionally, too. Adrian walked to the observation window, staring at Grace lying motionless on the bed. Her face was pale, framed by messy strands of hair. Machines beeped rhythmically beside her. Yet, even now, she looked peaceful, innocent. He whispered to himself, "You're safe now. I'll make sure you always will be." Meanwhile, across town, Andrew paced inside his penthouse, his shirt still stained with blood. Vanessa stood near the window, panic flickering in her eyes. "You said she was dead," she hissed. Andrew turned sharply. "She was supposed to be." Bennett interfered. "He'll ruin everything if she talks." Vanessa's voice cracked. "You need to leave the country before they start asking questions." Andrew slammed his fist against the wall. "Not yet. Not until I know what she remembers." Back at the hospital, Grace stirred faintly. Her eyelids fluttered. The world around her blurred white lights, soft murmurs, the faint hum of machines. Then, through the haze, she saw a familiar face. Adrian. He was sitting beside her, his expensive suit wrinkled, eyes heavy from sleeplessness. "You're safe," he said softly. "The baby's safe, too." Tears welled in her eyes. "Why?" she whispered weakly. "Why would anyone—" Adrian hesitated. "Sometimes love turns into greed, and greed destroys everything in its way." Grace closed her eyes, a single tear slipping down her cheek. "He tried to kill me." Adrian nodded slowly. "Yes, but he failed." He reached for her hand, squeezing gently. "And as long as I'm here, he never will again." Outside, the storm began to fade, as if the heavens themselves had decided to give Grace one more chance at life. The morning sun crept through the hospital blinds, washing the room in pale gold. Grace blinked awake, disoriented, her body aching. The rhythmic beeping of the monitor was the only thing keeping her calm. Her hands instinctively moved to her belly. The baby kicked softly alive. Relief flooded her eyes, followed by confusion. The door opened. Andrew walked in, holding a bouquet of lilies. "You're awake," he said with an overly gentle smile. "You had me terrified." Grace studied him, searching for something real in his eyes. "The doctor said I lost a lot of blood," she murmured. He nodded quickly. "Yes, they said it was stress. You've been pushing yourself too hard, but everything's fine now." "Fine." The word echoed in her head like a lie. He set the flowers beside her bed and leaned closer. "You scared me to death, Grace. I thought—" He paused, letting his voice tremble. "I thought I'd lost you." She forced a faint smile. "I'm still here." He kissed her forehead and sat down. For a while, silence filled the room, heavy and suffocating. Grace stared at him, the man she had once trusted with her heart, her company, her future. But something inside her whispered that the man sitting before her wasn't the same anymore. Later that day, when Andrew stepped out to talk with the doctor, Grace's nurse came in. She was an older woman with kind eyes. "You're lucky," the nurse said softly. "If that gentleman hadn't brought you in when he did, you and the baby wouldn't have made it." Grace frowned. "You mean my husband?" The nurse shook her head. "No, dear. Mr. Bennett. He's been here every day since you came in." Grace's heart skipped a beat. "Adrian Bennett?" The nurse smiled. "He's in the waiting room now. Said he won't leave until you're better." Grace looked toward the window, lost in thought. Adrian Bennett, the billionaire investor who barely knew her personally, had saved her life and stayed. Why? That evening, when Andrew left to take care of business, Adrian quietly entered the room. He looked tired but composed, his gaze softening when he saw her awake. "You look stronger," he said. I don't know how to thank you, Grace replied weakly. They told me you're the reason I'm still here. He shook his head. You don't owe me thanks. I did what anyone decent would do. Then his tone changed, low and serious. But Grace, I need to ask, do you remember anything from that night? She hesitated. Not much. Just the champagne, the taste. It was bitter. Adrian's eyes darkened. That's what I feared. What are you saying? He leaned closer, voice barely above a whisper. I think someone tampered with your drink. I saw the footage from the gala. Her pulse quickened. No, you're wrong. Andrew would never, wouldn't he? Adrian asked quietly. Sometimes the people closest to us are the ones holding the knife. Grace turned away, tears welling in her eyes. The thought was unbearable. Adrian straightened. You don't have to believe me now, but please be careful. Promise me that. She nodded silently. Her heart caught between love and suspicion, and for the first time, Grace began to fear the man who shared her last name. 2 days later, the hospital felt colder. Grace could walk again, but her steps were slow, unsteady, each one shadowed by unease. Andrew had been visiting less frequently, always leaving early with vague excuses about urgent company meetings. She didn't argue, she only watched. That afternoon, as she sat in bed flipping through her phone, she noticed something strange. Andrew's phone was on the nightstand beside the flowers he'd brought. It buzzed once, then again. Curiosity tugged at her, something she had never felt before in their marriage. She hesitated, then reached for it. The screen lit up with a message. Vanessa Brown. Her stomach dropped. She swiped quickly, heart pounding. The conversation was still open. Vanessa. She's still alive? Andrew. Yes, but not for long. Bennett's watching. Vanessa. Then finish it. We can't risk her talking. Grace's vision blurred. Her fingers trembled as she read the words again, unable to breathe. The room spun. Every memory, every smile, every "I love you" crashed like glass inside her chest. She set the phone down slowly, forcing herself not to scream. Her heart raced so hard she could hear it echo in her ears. The betrayal wasn't just emotional, it was lethal. Her husband, the man who once held her through sleepless nights, was planning her death. A soft knock interrupted her spiral. The door opened, and Adrian Bennett stepped in. You look pale, he said gently. Are you all right? Grace swallowed hard, trying to steady her voice. I just need air. He sat beside her, his gaze filled with concern. Grace, I've been digging into your husband's finances. You deserve to know what I found. Her eyes widened. What do you mean? Adrian handed her a folder. Inside were bank statements, transfers millions of dollars routed to a private account under Vanessa Brown's name. They've been moving money for months, he said quietly. He's planning to liquidate your shares and disappear. Grace's breath caught. Oh my God. Listen to me, Adrian continued. You can't confront him yet. You're not strong enough. Let me help you gather evidence first. Then, when the time is right, you'll walk away and he'll lose everything. She looked up at him, eyes brimming with tears. Why are you helping me? He hesitated, then said softly, because no one deserves to be destroyed for loving the wrong person. For a long moment, silence filled the room. Grace clutched the folder, her knuckles white. The truth burned through her like fire, yet behind the pain, a spark of strength flickered. That night, Andrew returned, pretending affection, pretending worry. Grace smiled faintly, hiding the storm in her heart. She poured him a drink and said, Thank you for taking care of everything, darling. He kissed her forehead, oblivious to the fact that the woman before him no longer trusted him, no longer feared him. As he turned away, Grace whispered to herself, You wanted me gone. But now, I'm the one watching you. And in that moment, her pain transformed into quiet, burning resolve. The following morning, sunlight streamed through the hospital blinds, but Grace felt none of its warmth. Her heart was still raw from the night before. The phone messages, the bank statements, the realization that her husband wanted her dead, all of it echoed in her mind like a storm that refused to end. When Adrian Bennett walked into the room with 2 cups of coffee, Grace looked up, her eyes hollow but steady. "I read everything," she said quietly. "Every word." Adrian set the cups down. "Then you understand why you can't go back home." "I have to," she whispered. "If I disappear, he'll know something's wrong. He'll destroy the evidence before we can act." Adrian studied her for a long moment. There was no trace of fear in her voice, only resolve. "Then we'll do it your way," he said. "But we'll do it smart." He opened his briefcase and placed a thick folder on her lap. Inside were legal documents, accounts, and property titles. "This is the beginning of your protection," he explained. "We'll transfer your assets into a private trust under a new name. He won't see it coming." Grace's hand trembled as she turned the pages. "You've thought of everything." "I've seen men like Andrew before," Adrian replied, his tone dark. "They crave power until it consumes them. The only way to beat him is to take away what he values most: control." Grace nodded slowly, determination replacing pain. "And what do I do in the meantime?" "You act normal," Adrian said. "Smile. Pretend you forgive him. Let him think you're weak. People like Andrew always underestimate a woman's silence." She gave a faint, sad laugh. "You sound like someone who's lived through betrayal." Adrian looked away for a moment. "I have. My wife trusted the wrong people in my company. I lost her because I didn't see it in time." The admission hung heavy between them. Grace felt a strange comfort in his honesty, 2 souls scarred by trust, now standing on the edge of vengeance and justice. That afternoon, Grace checked out of the hospital. Andrew arrived to pick her up, smiling as if nothing had happened. He kissed her cheek and whispered, "Let's go home, my love." She forced a smile. "I missed you." The drive was silent. Andrew hummed along to the radio, one hand on the wheel, the other resting near hers. Grace glanced at him, remembering every lie, every deceit hidden behind that charming face. When they arrived at the penthouse, she walked straight to her study. He followed. "Working already," he teased. "Just tying up some loose ends," she replied, turning on her laptop. Behind her calm tone was a secret mission backing up financial records, duplicating files, every step of her quiet rebellion. That night, after Andrew fell asleep, Grace stood by the window, watching the city lights below. She placed her hand gently on her stomach and whispered, "I promise, baby. He'll never hurt us again." Her phone buzzed. A message from Adrian appeared. "Tomorrow, we start taking back your life." "Ah. B." Grace smiled faintly, the first true smile in weeks. Because now, the hunted woman had a plan and a powerful ally by her side. The penthouse glowed with the soft light of evening. Jazz played faintly from the living room speakers, the same playlist Grace used to love. Andrew moved about the kitchen, cooking dinner as if nothing had ever happened. "Your favorite," he said cheerfully. "Grilled salmon, steamed vegetables. Doctor's orders, right?" Grace stood by the counter, watching him with calm eyes. To anyone else, it looked like a perfect marriage husband caring for wife after a health scare. But inside, she was calculating every move, every word. The woman he thought was fragile was now planning his downfall. "Smells wonderful," she said softly. Andrew smiled. "I just want things to feel normal again." "Normal," she repeated quietly, tasting the word like poison. He placed her plate in front of her, sitting across the table. "We've been through a lot," he began. "Maybe this is our second chance. I've missed you, Grace. The company isn't the same without you." Her fork paused midair. "I thought Vanessa was keeping things together." He froze for half a second before recovering. "Vanessa? She's just helping temporarily." "Don't tell me you're jealous." Grace smiled faintly. "Should I be?" He reached across the table, taking her hand. "Never." She allowed it, though every muscle in her body screamed to pull away. His touch, once comforting, now felt like ice. "You're right," she said quietly. "We should start over." Andrew's eyes brightened. "That's my girl." What he didn't see was the small recording device hidden beneath the fruit bowl. Adrian had given it to her the night before. Every lie is evidence, he'd said. Let him talk. Over dinner, Andrew spoke freely about business, money, and how some investors were getting impatient. He mentioned offshore accounts, private transfers, and hinted at a deal that would change everything. Grace kept her expression neutral, nodding at the right moments, each word sinking deep into her memory. After the meal, Andrew poured wine. "One glass won't hurt," he teased. She shook her head gently. "No wine. Not until the baby's born." He shrugged, drinking his own. "You're glowing, you know. Motherhood suits you." Her lips curled in a small, unreadable smile. "I suppose betrayal changes a woman's glow, too." Andrew frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing," she said quickly. "Just talking." He laughed it off, but his eyes flickered with suspicion. Grace excused herself and went to the bedroom, locking the door behind her. Her breathing quickened. She removed the tiny recorder and placed it into a small box marked Documents. The file was growing thicker: emails, bank records, and now his own words. Her phone buzzed. A message from Adrian appeared. "Progress?" She typed back. "He's talking. Keep the trust ready." Andrew knocked lightly on the door. "Grace, everything okay?" "Yes," she said sweetly. "Just tired. Good night, darling." He lingered outside for a moment, then walked away. Grace sat on the bed, staring out the window at the city lights, her hand on her stomach. "Hang in there," she whispered to her unborn child. "We're almost free." And in the quiet of that night, her silence became her strongest weapon. The next evening, the penthouse glowed under warm candlelight. The air smelled of rosemary and red wine, romance staged with precision. Andrew had gone to great lengths to create the illusion of love. He lit candles, played soft piano music, and arranged roses on the dining table. Grace stepped out of the bedroom, dressed in a simple ivory dress. Her beauty was effortless, but her eyes carried quiet suspicion. "What's the occasion?" she asked. Andrew smiled. "Dinner for two. I thought we deserved something special after everything we've been through." She studied him for a moment. "You're trying very hard lately," he chuckled. "Can you blame me? I almost lost you." She walked to the table and sat down. "Almost," she repeated softly. As he poured wine into her glass, she noticed the faintest tremor in his hand. Her heart skipped. She had seen that same motion before the night of the gala. Her instincts screamed. He placed the bottle down. "A toast," he said, raising his glass. "To us, to forgiveness, and to the family we're about to become." Grace forced a smile and lifted her glass, her pulse racing. "To us." They clinked glasses. She watched carefully as he drank deeply, while she only pretended to sip. The bitter scent rising from her glass confirmed her worst fear. Andrew leaned back, eyes glimmering. "Feels good, doesn't it, starting over?" "Almost perfect," she replied quietly, placing her glass down. A few minutes later, as they ate, he spoke casually. "You know, once the baby's born, we should take a trip. Somewhere peaceful. Away from business. Away from stress." Grace nodded. "That sounds nice." His voice softened. "You trust me again, right?" She looked at him for a long moment. "Of course, Andrew. Completely." He smiled, unaware that every word was being recorded by the tiny device sewn inside her dress. Adrian's idea, if he tries again, we'll have proof beyond doubt. Halfway through dinner, Andrew's smile faltered. He reached for his glass, blinked hard, and frowned. "Strange taste," he murmured. Grace tilted her head slightly. "Really?" "Mine tasted fine." Within seconds, his breathing changed short, sharp gasps. Sweat glistened on his forehead. He stood, gripping the edge of the table. What's happening?" She rose slowly, her voice calm. "You look unwell, darling." His eyes widened as realization struck. I didn't poison you, Andrew," she said softly. "You did. You poured from the same bottle." He stumbled, knocking over a chair. "Call an ambulance." Grace walked toward him, her face expressionless. "The same way you called one for me?" He collapsed to his knees, gasping for air. Panic flooded his eyes. She grabbed her phone and dialed. "Emergency," she said evenly. "My husband seems to be having a reaction. Please hurry." When help arrived, Andrew was barely conscious. Grace stood aside, calm, collected. The paramedics rushed him out on a stretcher, the same way they had carried her days before. As the door closed, Grace whispered, "You taught me not to trust appearances." Lesson learned, and for the first time, the predator had tasted his own poison. Bright white lights flooded the emergency room. The sharp scent of disinfectant filled the air as doctors surrounded Andrew's stretcher. Tubes, monitors, voices, shouting orders. It was chaos, a mirror of the night Grace nearly died. Only this time, she wasn't the one on the table. Grace stood outside the glass wall, watching silently. Her expression was unreadable. The man inside had once been her whole world. Now he looked small, fragile, and strangely human beneath the blinding lights. When the door opened, a nurse asked, "Are you his wife?" "Yes," Grace answered evenly. "His condition is stable for now," the nurse said. "He ingested a concentrated toxin. Lucky you called so fast." Grace nodded. "Yes, lucky." Hours later, Andrew lay motionless in a hospital bed, his face pale, lips dry. Machines beeped softly beside him. Grace entered quietly, her heels tapping against the floor. She closed the door behind her, the sound echoing like a final note. He stirred, opening his eyes. "Grace?" She stepped closer. "You're awake. What happened?" His voice was weak. "You tell me," she replied. "You poured from the same bottle you poisoned." Confusion crossed his face, then realization. You switched the glasses." "I learned from the best," she said, her tone cold but calm. "Don't worry, I didn't want you dead. I just wanted you to know how it feels to choke on your own cruelty." Andrew's breathing quickened. "Grace, listen." "No," she cut him off. "You listen. I know about the money transfers, the messages, Vanessa, the plan, every disgusting detail." His eyes darted away. "You don't understand. She tricked me." "Stop lying." Her voice cracked, the first crack in her composure. "You looked me in the eye every day while planning my death. You poisoned your pregnant wife, Andrew, your own child." He closed his eyes, guilt, or perhaps shame, shadowing his face. "I was desperate," he muttered. "I was losing control of the company." Vanessa said. Grace laughed bitterly. "Vanessa said? You risked my life for a woman who would sell you the moment your money runs out." He looked at her, pain twisting his features. "Grace, please, don't let them take everything. Help me." She stared down at him, tears welling despite herself. "You already took everything, Andrew. My trust, my peace. The version of me who loved you died the night you tried to kill us." He reached for her hand, but she stepped back. "Grace, I'm sorry." She wiped her tears and whispered, "You're sorry because you failed." For a moment, silence filled the room, except for the soft hum of machines. Then Grace leaned closer, her voice low. "Tomorrow, the police will have everything they need. Your bank records, your texts, your confession from tonight." Adrian made sure of it. Andrew's eyes widened in horror. "You recorded this?" Grace gave a faint smile. "Every word." As she turned to leave, he whispered weakly, "You won't win, Grace." She paused at the door, glancing back. "I already did. I survived." And with that, she walked away, leaving him trapped in the sterile glow of his own consequences. The next morning, the city awoke under a pale gray sky. Grace sat in her car outside the hospital, her fingers gripping a small flash drive. On it were recordings, documents, and messages, the proof that would end Andrew Miller's empire. Adrian Bennett sat in the passenger seat beside her, his calm presence grounding her storm. "You're sure you want to do this?" he asked quietly. Grace looked out the window at the hospital doors. "I'm done being afraid. He built his power on lies. Now the truth will destroy him." Adrian nodded. "Then let's make it official." They drove to the downtown precinct. Inside, the air smelled of coffee and tension. Grace walked to the front desk, shoulders squared. "I need to speak to Detective Rowan," she said. The detective, a tall woman with sharp eyes, appeared moments later. "Mrs. Miller? We've been expecting you." Mr. Bennett called ahead. Grace handed her the flash drive. "Everything you need is here: financial transfers, recordings, text messages. He tried to kill me, twice." Rowan raised an eyebrow but said nothing. She gestured toward an interview room. "Let's go through it." For hours, Grace recounted everything: the gala, the poison, the affair, the staged dinners. Each detail came out steady, her voice firm but low. By the end, even the detective looked shaken. "You've been through hell," Rowan said softly. "But this is airtight. We'll issue the warrant today." When they left the precinct, Grace stepped into the sunlight, the weight of months lifting from her chest. Adrian placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You did the right thing." She nodded slowly. "It doesn't feel like victory yet. It feels empty." "That's because you're still healing," he said gently. "But once he's gone, you'll finally breathe again." Across town, Andrew sat in his hospital bed, scrolling through his phone. His lawyer had just left, assuring him that everything was under control. But a pit grew in his stomach. He could feel it, the walls closing in. Then his phone buzzed. A message from Vanessa. "Vanessa, we have a problem. Bennett's working with Grace. They've gone to the police." "Andrew, stay calm. Delete everything. I'll handle it." But when he tried to access his private accounts, every password failed. Each attempt returned the same message: access denied, account frozen. Panic hit like a knife. He threw the phone against the wall, shouting. Nurses rushed in, startled. "Get out," he barked. Meanwhile, Grace and Adrian sat in a quiet cafe, the tension between them softer now. She looked at him and whispered, "If you hadn't saved me that night, I wouldn't be here." He smiled faintly. Maybe it wasn't luck. Maybe it was meant to happen. Grace looked down at her tea, her voice trembling. "Do you really believe in fate?" He met her chaza, eyes warm. "After meeting you, I do." Her lips curved in a faint, grateful smile. "Then maybe this is the beginning of something good." Outside, the clouds broke, sunlight spilling across the streetlight after a long storm. And somewhere inside the hospital, the man who once controlled everything felt his world begin to crumble. The day began like any other in the heart of downtown. Employees of Miller Technologies hurried into the glass tower, unaware that their powerful boss was about to fall. Grace stood across the street, wearing a simple black coat, her hair tied neatly. Next to her, Adrian Bennett watched in silence as unmarked police cars rolled to the curb. "You don't have to be here," Adrian said quietly. "Yes, I do," Grace replied. Her voice was calm, but her heart pounded. "I need to see it end." Inside the building, Andrew Miller sat in his corner office, surrounded by wealth-expensive art, fine whiskey, and the illusion of control. He stared at his reflection in the glass wall. His eyes were bloodshot from sleepless nights. Vanessa sat on the sofa nearby, nervously scrolling her phone. "Relax," Andrew said sharply. "They don't have anything. My lawyer's handling it." Vanessa didn't look up. "Grace isn't as weak as you think. She's been planning this." Andrew's jaw tightened. She wouldn't dare. Before she could respond, the elevator dinged. 4 detectives stepped out, followed by 2 uniformed officers. The entire floor went silent. "Andrew Miller," one of them called. He stood slowly. "What's this about?" The lead detective held up a document. "You're under arrest for attempted murder, fraud, and conspiracy. You have the right to remain silent." The words hit him like a blow. "This is insane." "I didn't—" Vanessa gasped as the officers approached. "Andrew, do something." He turned to her, eyes wild. "Shut up." As they handcuffed him, employees peeked from their offices, whispering in disbelief. The man who once ruled their company now looked like a stranger, cornered, desperate, powerless. "Grace!" Andrew shouted as he was led out. "You set me up." Grace stepped forward from the lobby, her expression steady. "No, Andrew. You set yourself up the moment you decided my life was disposable." His face twisted in rage. You think you've won. You're nothing without me. Adrian stepped closer, his voice low and sharp. She was everything before you, and she'll be more than you ever imagined after. The officers guided Andrew toward the elevator. As the doors closed, his final words echoed. You'll regret this, Grace. The building erupted with whispers. Cameras flashed. Reporters flooded the entrance within minutes, their microphones pointed at Grace. Mrs. Miller, how does it feel seeing your husband arrested? Grace paused, her voice firm but calm. Justice isn't revenge. It's closure. Adrian placed a hand on her shoulder as they pushed through the crowd. You did it, he murmured. Grace exhaled shakily. No, Adrian. We did. Meanwhile, in the back of the police car, Andrew glared out the window. Vanessa sat in the lobby, trembling. Her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. They'll come for you next. She looked up, panic spreading. The empire she helped destroy was collapsing around her. Outside, as the police convoy pulled away, Grace turned to Adrian. Is it wrong that I don't feel joy? He shook his head. It's not joy, Grace. It's peace. For the first time in months, she allowed herself a real breath. The storm was finally breaking, and as Andrew disappeared behind steel bars, Grace stepped into the sunlight free at last. 3 months later, the courtroom was packed. Reporters filled every bench, their cameras ready, whispering headlines before the verdict was even spoken. The once glorious name Andrew Miller had become a national scandal, the CEO who tried to kill his pregnant wife. Grace sat quietly in the front row, dressed in a navy suit. Her posture was straight, her hands folded neatly over her lap, but her heart pounded. Behind her, Adrian Bennett watched in silence, his steady presence keeping her anchored. The bailiff called, "All rise." Everyone stood as Judge Harris entered. The gavel struck once, echoing like thunder. Court is now in session. Andrew was led in, wearing a dark suit that no longer fit his frame. He looked thinner, older. The arrogance that once defined him was gone, replaced by restless eyes that darted toward Grace. Their gazes met for the first time since the arrest. For a moment, neither spoke. He offered a faint, desperate smile. She gave him nothing in return. Vanessa Brown entered next, escorted by an officer. Her hair was disheveled, her once confident stride now replaced by trembling steps. She refused to look at Grace, instead staring at the floor as she took her seat beside Andrew. The prosecutor began. Your Honor, this case is about greed, betrayal, and an attempt to silence the very woman who built the empire these defendants sought to steal. Grace's breath caught as they played the recordings. Andrew's voice filled the courtroom cold, calculating, unmistakable. Andrew's voice. Once she's gone, everything transfers to me. She'll never see it coming. Gasps rippled through the audience. Andrew's lawyer objected. Out of context, Your Honor. The judge overruled. Continue. Next came the text messages, the financial transfers, and finally, Grace's own recording from the hospital. Grace's voice. You poured from the same bottle you poisoned. Andrew. You switched the glasses. Silence followed. Andrew's face drained of color. Vanessa covered her mouth, shaking. The prosecutor turned to Grace. Mrs. Miller, can you tell the court how you felt when you realized your husband wanted you dead? She stood, her voice steady but soft. I felt disbelief, then heartbreak, but mostly relief that I survived, to tell the truth. Why didn't you retaliate? Grace glanced at Andrew, her eyes firm. Because revenge would make me like him. I wanted justice, not vengeance. Murmurs of approval spread through the courtroom. Adrian's eyes shone with quiet pride. When the defense took its turn, Andrew tried to sound remorseful. I was manipulated, he said, gesturing toward Vanessa. She convinced me Grace was cheating, that she planned to take everything. Vanessa stood abruptly. You liar. It was your idea. The courtroom erupted. The judge slammed the gavel. Order. For a brief moment, the two conspirators turned on each other, shouting blame. The entire world watched the empire of deceit collapse live on camera. As the session adjourned for the day, Grace stepped outside into the crisp autumn air. Reporters swarmed, microphones flashing. "Mrs. Miller, what do you hope for tomorrow's verdict?" one asked. Grace paused. "I hope the truth speaks louder than their lies." Adrian joined her at the courthouse steps. "Whatever happens, you've already won," he said quietly. Grace looked toward the setting Sunday. "No," she whispered. "I've just begun." And inside those courtroom walls, justice waited patient, unstoppable, and finally within reach. The morning of the verdict dawned cold and gray. The courthouse loomed against the skyline, a monument of truth and judgment. Crowds gathered outside, news cameras already rolling. The world wanted to see how the story of Grace Miller, the pregnant CEO betrayed by her husband, would end. Inside, Grace sat quietly at the front, her hands clasped around a small silver pendant she had worn since the night she was saved. Adrian Bennett sat behind her, his calm presence like armor. Andrew entered in handcuffs. The murmurs grew louder. His once polished appearance was gone. His suit hung loosely, and his eyes looked hollow. He scanned the room, searching for Grace. When he found her, she didn't look away. Vanessa Brown followed, escorted by an officer. She looked broken, her confidence stripped bare. Neither of them spoke. The silence between them was heavier than any chain. The bailiff called, "All rise." The judge entered, his face stern. He took his seat and looked over the courtroom. "In the matter of the state versus Andrew Miller and Vanessa Brown," he began, "this court has reached its verdict." Grace's heart pounded so hard she could hear it in her ears. Adrian's steady gaze from behind reminded her to breathe. The judge continued, "The jury finds the defendant, Andrew Miller." He paused, letting the tension build. "Guilty on all counts, attempted murder, fraud, and conspiracy." Gasps rippled through the room. Andrew's face turned ashen. His lawyer slumped back in defeat. The judge went on. "Vanessa Brown, guilty as an accessory to attempted murder and corporate fraud." Vanessa covered her face, sobbing. "It wasn't supposed to go this far," she cried. The judge ignored her. "Andrew Miller, this court sentences you to 25 years in federal prison without parole. Vanessa Brown, 10 years. The gavel struck once final, sharp, echoing like thunder through the silent courtroom. Andrew stood abruptly, eyes blazing. "Grace, please," he shouted, his voice trembling. "You can't let them do this. I loved you." Grace rose slowly, turning to face him. "You loved power, Andrew. You loved yourself. What you did wasn't love. It was greed, dressed as devotion." He shook his head, tears spilling. "I made a mistake." She stepped closer, her voice soft but firm. "No, you made a choice." Two officers grabbed his arms, leading him away. As he passed Adrian, Andrew hissed, "You think you've won, old man?" Adrian didn't flinch. "I didn't win, Andrew." She did. Vanessa was led out next, her sobs fading down the hallway. Cameras clicked. The whispers of spectators filled the air like wind through broken glass. Grace turned toward the judge. "Thank you, Your Honor," she said quietly, "for giving truth a voice." Outside, reporters surged forward. "Mrs. Miller, how do you feel?" Grace paused at the courthouse steps, the sun breaking through the clouds. "Justice isn't always about punishment," she said. "Sometimes it's about peace." Adrian stepped beside her. "You did it," he murmured. She looked up at the clear sky, her eyes soft. "No, Adrian. We did." And as they walked away from the courthouse, Grace felt the first true light of freedom touch her face. For the first time in years, her story was no longer about survival, it was about rebirth. Weeks passed after the verdict, and for the first time, in what felt like years, the world around Grace slowed down. The tension that had lived inside her chest finally began to fade. The constant noise of fear and betrayal was replaced by the gentle rhythm of healing. She had moved temporarily to one of Adrian Bennett's seaside villas, a place far away from the city, where the ocean met the horizon in endless blue. The air smelled of salt and freedom. Waves crashed softly against the shore outside her balcony, and each morning the sunlight poured through white curtains like a quiet promise. You survived. Grace sat on the veranda wrapped in a blanket, sipping herbal tea. Her belly had grown. The baby was due soon. She rested her hand gently over it and whispered, "You're safe now. We're both safe." Behind her, footsteps approached. "You're awake early," Adrian said softly. He carried 2 cups of coffee, his usual ritual. Grace smiled faintly. "I couldn't sleep. The ocean has its own heartbeat." He handed her a cup and sat across from her. "It suits you here. Peace looks good on you." She looked out at the waves. "Peace still feels strange. I've been running for so long. I don't know what calm is anymore." Adrian leaned forward. "You'll find it. Slowly. One sunrise at a time." They sat in silence for a moment, the kind that didn't need to be filled. For Grace, his presence had become a quiet comfort, a reminder that kindness still existed, even after everything she'd lost. Later that day, Grace walked barefoot along the beach. The wind tugged at her hair as she watched the horizon. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a future, a home where laughter wasn't laced with fear, where love didn't hurt. Her phone buzzed. A message from Detective Rowan. "Andrew and Vanessa have been transferred. Case officially closed. You're free, Mrs. Miller." She stared at the words, feeling tears blur her vision. Free. The word felt almost unreal. She typed back, "Thank you. Truly." As she slipped her phone away, she heard Adrian's voice behind her. "Good news?" She turned, smiling through her tears. "The best kind." "It's over." He nodded, his eyes warm. "Then maybe it's time to start again." She tilted her head, curious. "Start again?" He hesitated, his gaze lingering on her. "A new chapter. Whatever it means for you. Whatever it takes to make you happy again." Grace looked at him, really looked, and for a moment, the weight of everything she'd endured melted away. "You've already helped me more than you know, Adrian." He smiled softly. "You helped yourself. I just reminded you how strong you were." That evening, Grace stood by the window as the sun dipped below the ocean. The sky turned gold and crimson, and for the first time, she felt peace wash over her completely. She whispered to herself, "The worst is behind me. The rest is life." And somewhere in that quiet sunset, Grace realized that healing wasn't about forgetting, it was about finally choosing to live again. The morning began with the soft hum of waves brushing the shore. The sea was calm, the sky painted in pink and gold. Grace woke to a sharp pain in her abdomen, a deep, rolling pressure that made her gasp. For a moment, she thought it was another nightmare, until the next contraction hit. Her breath caught. "It's time," she whispered. Adrian rushed in seconds later, his shirt half-buttoned, eyes wide. "Grace." She gripped the edge of the bed. "The baby, it's coming." Within minutes, he was on the phone, voice steady despite the panic in his eyes. "Yes. This is Adrian Bennett. Send an ambulance to Bennett Coastal Villa. She's in active labor." Grace tried to breathe through the pain. "Adrian," she murmured. "I'm scared." He knelt beside her, taking her hand. "You faced death and survived. You can handle bringing life into the world." Tears filled her eyes as another wave of pain surged. "Stay with me, always," he promised. The paramedics arrived quickly. The ride to the hospital blurred in flashes of pain and motion, sirens wailing, voices giving instructions. Adrian's hand never leaving hers. She caught glimpses of the ocean through the window, the water glimmering like hope itself. At the hospital, doctors surrounded her. "She's crowning," one said. "Keep breathing, Mrs. Miller. You're doing great." Grace clenched her teeth, gripping Adrian's hand with surprising strength. Sweat poured down her forehead. "I can't." "Yes, you can," Adrian said firmly. "Look at me. You're not alone." Minutes stretched into hours. Then, suddenly, the room filled with a sound so pure it silenced everything else, a newborn's cry. Grace's body sagged in relief, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Is he?" "He's perfect," the nurse said, placing a tiny, wriggling baby in her arms. Grace stared at the little face nestled against her chest. "Hi, sweetheart," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Welcome to the world." Adrian stood beside her, awe softening his usually composed expression. Grace smiled weakly. "Would you like to hold him?" He hesitated, as if afraid his touch might break the moment. "Are you sure?" "Positive," she said. Carefully, he took the baby. The child's small fingers curled around one of his. Adrian swallowed hard, emotion flickering across his face. "You saved me too, little one," he murmured. Grace watched them, warmth flooding her heart. For the first time, she felt what safety truly meant, not the illusion Andrew once offered, but something real and unselfish. The nurse entered quietly. "Do you have a name?" Grace looked at Adrian, then back at her son. "Evan," she said softly. "It means life." The nurse smiled. A perfect name. That night, after everyone left, Grace sat in the dim light, rocking Evan gently. The storm that had once defined her life felt distant now. She pressed a kiss to his forehead and whispered, "You're my new beginning." Adrian watched from the doorway, a quiet smile on his face. And in that peaceful room, under the soft hum of machines and the rhythm of tiny breaths, Grace finally found the redemption she had been fighting for. The days after Evan's birth passed in a gentle blur of warmth and sleepless nights. The hospital room that had once held fear now overflowed with peace. Grace spent hours watching her newborn sleep, memorizing every breath, every tiny movement. The world outside could wait. Adrian Bennett visited every day, always bringing flowers or fresh coffee. He'd sit quietly, helping where he could, changing blankets, holding Evan while Grace rested. It became their unspoken routine, filled with the quiet intimacy of shared gratitude. One evening, the sky outside turned deep violet. The sun melted into the ocean, leaving streaks of gold across the horizon. Grace stood by the window, rocking Evan gently in her arms. Adrian watched her from across the room, his eyes soft but thoughtful. "You've been here every single day," she said without turning around. "You should go home, Adrian. You've done enough." He smiled faintly. "You saved my life too, you know." She turned, confused. "What do you mean?" He hesitated before answering. "Before all this, I was just existing. Meetings, deals, endless noise. Money filled the space where meaning should have been. Then that night I saw you on the floor, bleeding, fighting for your life. It woke something in me I thought had died." Grace blinked, unsure what to say. Adrian continued, his voice low. "My wife, Claire, died 5 years ago. I couldn't save her. A car accident. I was too busy on a conference call to answer her last call. I told myself she died instantly, but sometimes I wonder if she called out for me." Grace's eyes filled with tears. "I'm so sorry," he nodded slowly. "After that, I stopped feeling anything real. Until you." "Adrian, I don't want to overstep," he said, stepping closer. "You've been through so much. You need peace, not pressure. But I can't keep pretending that what I feel is just sympathy." Grace's heart pounded. The baby stirred softly in her arms. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that I care about you more than I thought I ever could again." His voice trembled slightly. "And not because you needed saving. Because you reminded me that life is worth saving." The room was silent except for the faint hum of the machines. Grace looked at him, this man who had stood by her when everyone else disappeared. The one who saw her not as a victim but as a survivor. Tears slipped down her cheeks. "Adrian, I don't know what my heart is ready for." He smiled sadly. "Then I'll wait. I'm not asking for an answer tonight." He looked down at Evan and brushed a finger gently over the baby's hand. "You already have everything that matters right here. Just know, if someday your heart has room for more, mine will still be waiting." Grace's throat tightened. "You're a good man, Adrian." He looked at her with quiet sincerity. "No. Just a man who finally learned what love really means." And as the last light of sunset bathed them in gold, Grace realized that sometimes love doesn't rescue, it redeems. 2 years passed. The world that once felt shattered had been rebuilt, piece by piece, into something stronger and far more beautiful. Grace Miller now, Grace Bennett, stood before the glass windows of her new office, overlooking the same skyline that had once witnessed her downfall. But this time, she wasn't afraid. The name on the building had changed. Miller Technologies was gone. The new sign read, Evan Global Innovations. Her son's name. A legacy built from pain, turned into hope. Employees moved briskly through the lobby below, young, inspired, and loyal. Many were women who had come from broken marriages, financial hardship, or betrayal. Grace had made it her mission to give them a second chance, just as life had given her one. Behind her, the door opened. Adrian stepped in, wearing a dark suit and his familiar calm smile. "The press is waiting downstairs," he said. "You ready to introduce the world to Evan Global?" Grace turned, her expression soft but determined. "I've been ready for this moment my whole life. I just didn't know it until now." He handed her a folder. "Final numbers from last quarter. You did it, Grace. You turned everything around." She smiled. "No, we did. You believed in me when I didn't even believe in myself." Adrian leaned against the desk. "That's because I saw the fire in you. It never really went out." Grace looked out the window again. "It did, for a while. But Evan lit it back up. Every time he laughs, I remember that I survived for a reason." Adrian watched her silently, admiration in his eyes. "He's lucky to have you." She turned to him, teasing lightly. "He's lucky to have us. You've been his anchor since day one." He chuckled. "He calls me Grandpa Adrian. I'm not sure how I feel about that." Grace laughed softly. "You love it." They shared a quiet moment of joy, the kind that came from peace earned through pain. Then her phone buzzed a message from the board confirming the company's official listing on the stock exchange. She had done it. The empire that Andrew tried to steal had been reborn under her own name. Grace closed her eyes for a moment, whispering, "Thank you." Adrian asked gently, "Talking to someone?" She smiled faintly. "To the woman I used to be. The one who thought her story was over." Adrian's gaze softened. "What would you tell her now?" Grace turned toward him, her eyes bright with quiet strength. "That every ending is just a beginning in disguise. That no matter how much they try to break you, they can't destroy what's meant for you." The intercom buzzed. "Mrs. Bennett, the media's ready." Grace straightened her blazer and exhaled. "Let's show them what survival looks like." As she walked toward the elevator, Adrian followed beside her. Reporters waited below, cameras flashing, questions ready. Grace smiled at them all, holding Evan's tiny hand as he toddled forward beside her. The lights, the crowd, the whispers, none of it intimidated her anymore. Because this time, the spotlight didn't expose her pain. It revealed her power. The sky was painted with gold and lavender as the ocean breeze swept gently across the shore. Waves whispered against the sand, carrying the scent of salt and wildflowers. White chairs lined the beach, ribbons fluttering in the wind, and a soft melody drifted from the string quartet nearby. Grace stood before the mirror inside a small seaside villa, her reflection glowing beneath the late afternoon sunday. Her wedding gown was simple, elegant lace, flowing fabric, nothing extravagant, but perfect. Her hair fell in loose waves, crowned with delicate pearls. For a moment, she couldn't believe this day was real. "Mommy, you look like a princess," said a small voice. Grace turned to see Evan, now 2 years old, wearing a tiny suit, his smile wide and innocent. She bent down, kissing his forehead. "And you, my love, look like my prince." He giggled. "Is Mr. Adrian my daddy now?" Grace's breath caught for a second, but she smiled softly. "He will be today." Outside, Adrian Bennett waited beneath a floral arch overlooking the ocean. The years had added a few silver strands to his hair, but his eyes still carried the same warmth that had once pulled her from darkness. As guests took their seats, he looked out at the horizon and thought about how life had come full circle, how love had found him again when he least expected it. The music began. Everyone turned as Grace stepped onto the aisle, her hand gently resting on Evan's. The wind caught her veil, lifting it slightly like the sea itself was blessing her. Adrian's heart ached with quiet joy. She was radiant, strong, alive, whole. Not the woman broken by betrayal, but the one reborn through it. When she reached him, he whispered, "You take my breath away." Grace smiled. "You gave it back to me." The officiant spoke softly over the waves. "Love does not erase pain, it transforms it. And today, we celebrate two souls who refuse to let pain define them." As they exchanged vows, Grace's hands trembled slightly. "Adrian," she began, her voice catching, "you found me when I was lost. You saw strength in me when I only saw scars. You reminded me that love isn't supposed to hurt, it's supposed to heal." Tears welled in his eyes as he replied, "Grace, you taught me that life can begin again, no matter how much we lose. You gave me hope. You gave me family." When the officiant declared, "You may kiss the bride," the crowd erupted in applause as their lips met a kiss not of passion alone, but of peace earned through struggle. Evan clapped his tiny hands. "Mommy's happy," he shouted, making everyone laugh. Adrian lifted him up, the three of them framed against the glowing sunset. "We're happy, son," he said softly. As the sun sank into the horizon, Grace leaned against Adrian's shoulder, watching the sky fade into stars. "It's strange," she murmured. "Once, I thought the sea was where I'd lose everything. Now it's where I found everything." Adrian kissed her forehead. "That's the beauty of second chances." And as waves danced beneath the moonlight, their love became not a rescue but a home. 3 years passed after the wedding by the sea, and the Bennett estate had become more than a home, it was a haven. The ocean breeze still rolled through the open windows every morning, carrying laughter, the smell of coffee, and the sound of a little boy's footsteps running down the hall. Grace stood in the kitchen, pouring pancakes onto a skillet while Evan sat on the counter, swinging his small legs. "More chocolate chips, Mommy," he said seriously. "You'll turn into one if I do," she teased, tossing him a grin. Adrian entered, tie undone, reading glasses perched on his nose. "I thought this house had a no sugar before breakfast rule." Evan pointed at him proudly. "Mommy broke it first." Adrian laughed, crossing the room to kiss Grace's forehead. "You two are a dangerous team." For a brief moment, time froze the warmth, the laughter, the sunlight painting the walls. It was everything Grace once thought she'd never have again. Later that day, she visited her foundation's new women's shelter in the city. The sign above the glass doors read, "The Hope Project." Inside, dozens of women and children gathered, those escaping broken homes, lost trust and fear. Grace walked among them, offering words of comfort. One woman approached her, eyes filled with tears. "Mrs. Bennett," she said softly, "your story saved me. When I saw your interview, I packed my things that same night. I finally left." Grace's chest tightened. "You were brave enough to take the first step. You saved yourself." Back home that evening, she sat on the terrace watching the sunset with Adrian. He handed her a cup of tea. "You're changing lives," he said. She shook her head gently. "I'm just giving what I once needed someone to tell me I wasn't weak for surviving." Adrian looked at her, admiration in his eyes. "You turned pain into purpose. That's strength, Grace." She smiled softly. "You turned loneliness into love. We both rebuilt something." They sat quietly, the sound of waves filling the silence. Evan played nearby with his toy cars, occasionally shouting, "Look, Daddy, fast car." Adrian laughed. "You've created a racetrack in our living room." Grace leaned her head on his shoulder. "As long as he's happy, I don't care." For a moment, she thought of the past, the betrayal, the poison, the courtroom. It felt like a lifetime ago, not because she forgot, but because she had healed. "Do you ever think about him?" Adrian asked gently. She hesitated. "Sometimes. Not with hate anymore. Just sadness. He could have had this too, if he'd chosen love instead of greed." Adrian squeezed her hand. "That's what makes you who you are. You forgive, but you never forget what it taught you." Grace turned toward him, her eyes glowing in the soft dusk. "It taught me that love doesn't have to hurt. It can be kind, safe, real." Adrian smiled. "Then I guess we're proof of that." She nodded, resting her head against his chest. And as the stars began to rise above the sea, their laughter echoed through the night, a melody of love born not from perfection, but from healing. The metal gates slammed shut behind Andrew Miller, sealing away what little remained of his pride. The cold echo of steel filled the corridor as he was led to his cell block C, room 214. His tailored suits and luxury watches were gone. Now he wore gray, the color of his fall. Days in prison blended into each other, measured not by time but by regret. The man who once commanded boardrooms now stood in line for food, invisible among faces hardened by consequence. The first weeks, Andrew told himself it was temporary, that his lawyers would appeal, that Vanessa would wait. But as months passed, hope began to rot inside him like rust on metal. Every night, the same dream haunted him. Grace standing over him in the hospital, her voice calm and merciless. "You're sorry because you failed." He'd wake up drenched in sweat, the sound of her words echoing in the dark. He tried writing letters to her, letters filled with apologies, explanations, and desperate promises. But each one ended up in the trash. She never wrote back. He couldn't blame her. 2 years into his sentence, a guard handed him a folded newspaper. On the front page was a photo of Grace and Adrian at a charity gala. The headline read, "The Bennetts donate $20 million to Women's Empowerment Fund." Andrew stared at the picture for a long time. Grace was smiling, radiant, peaceful, untouchable. The sight burned and soothed him all at once. He traced her face with his finger, whispering, "You finally got the life you deserved." Later that day, a visitor came. Vanessa Brown. She looked different, older, sharper, the spark in her eyes replaced by something colder. "So," he said, smirking faintly, "you decided to remember me." She sat down, crossing her arms. "Don't flatter yourself. I came because I needed closure." "Closure?" he repeated bitterly. "You're the reason I'm here." Her laugh was short and hollow. "We're both the reason we're here. But I've learned something in here, Andrew. You only regret what didn't go your way." He studied her for a moment. "You still working deals in your head, Vanessa?" She leaned forward, her voice sharp. "I've met someone. He's kind, real. I won't waste another second on men who destroy everything they touch." Andrew chuckled darkly. "Good luck. The world's full of men like me." She stood, her eyes cold. "Maybe. But there's only one of you, and that's your curse." When she left, Andrew sat in silence. For the first time, he didn't feel anger. He felt nothing at all. Years went by. Vanessa moved on, started a new life abroad. Grace's company flourished. Adrian's foundation grew. And Andrew? He remained behind bars, his name forgotten, his wealth meaningless. Sometimes, younger inmates asked about him. "Weren't you that CEO?" He'd smile faintly. "I was a man who had everything and learned too late what nothing feels like." That night, alone in his cell, he stared at the small window where moonlight spilled across the floor. "Grace," he whispered, voice breaking. "You won." And for the first time, he understood that prison wasn't the punishment, it was survival without redemption. Years slipped by like sand through a broken hourglass. The world outside moved on, but inside Greystone Penitentiary, time stood still. Andrew Miller had become a ghost, an echo of the man he once was. His hair had turned silver, his posture bent, his name long forgotten by the business world he once ruled. Every morning began the same. The blaring alarm, the clatter of metal trays, the shuffle of weary footsteps echoing down the corridor. But Andrew didn't complain. He'd stopped fighting long ago. One winter evening, he sat alone in the prison yard, wrapped in an old coat, watching the snow fall through the wire fence. He could still remember the warmth of the penthouse, the taste of fine wine, the sound of Grace's laughter before it all turned to poison. He pulled a worn photo from his pocket, the only one he had left. It was a picture from their early days, back when they were young and invincible. Grace was smiling at him, eyes bright with love and belief. His thumb brushed across her face. "You should have left me sooner," he whispered. A guard walked by. "Miller, mail for you." Andrew blinked in surprise. He hadn't received a letter in years. The envelope was plain, no return address. Inside was a single piece of paper. A child's drawing. Crayon strokes of a woman, a man, and a small boy standing by the ocean. Beneath it, in crooked handwriting, were 3 words. Mom says hi. His throat tightened. He turned the paper over, no signature, no clue. But he didn't need one. He knew. Grace hadn't forgotten him completely. Maybe she never could. Tears welled in his tired eyes as he stared at the drawing. "Evan," he murmured. "You're so big now, aren't you?" For the first time in years, his heart ached, not from regret, but from something softer, remorse. Later that night, as the prison lights dimmed, Andrew lay on his bunk staring at the ceiling. He thought about all the things he'd chased: money, power, control, and how small they looked now compared to the life he had destroyed. He imagined Grace somewhere by the sea, walking hand in hand with her son, maybe with Adrian beside her. He pictured her laughing, truly happy. It didn't sting anymore. It felt right. The guard making rounds found him still awake. "You good, Miller?" Andrew nodded faintly. "Yeah, I'm good." The guard walked away, and for a long moment, silence filled the cell. Andrew closed his eyes, clutching the drawing to his chest. Memories of Grace's smile, her voice, her forgiveness, the ones he never deserved, flickered like fading stars in his mind. He whispered to the darkness, "I hope you found peace, Grace. Maybe now I can find mine too." By morning, the guards found him lying still, the drawing clutched tightly in his hand. No struggle, no pain, just quiet release. Outside the walls of Greystone, the first rays of dawn painted the snow in gold. Somewhere, by the same rising sun, Grace stirred from sleep, feeling a strange calm in her chest, like a chapter had finally closed. And so ended the story of the man who lost everything but found redemption in silence. The morning sun filtered gently through the lace curtains of the Bennett seaside villa. Grace sat at the dining table, sipping tea while Evan colored at her side. The waves crashed softly outside, a sound that had become her daily rhythm of peace. The doorbell rang. The housekeeper answered, returning moments later with a small brown envelope. "Mrs. Bennett," she said. "This was delivered for you. No return address." Grace frowned. "Thank you." She turned the envelope over in her hands. The handwriting was shaky, unfamiliar, yet hauntingly human. Something in her chest tightened. She carefully tore it open. Inside was a letter, creased, old, and written in a hand she hadn't seen in years. Her breath caught when she read the first line. "Grace, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone." It was from Andrew. Her hands trembled as she unfolded the rest. Asterisk, asterisk. "I've spent years behind these walls thinking about the man. I became the one you didn't deserve. I don't expect forgiveness, but I hope someday you'll understand that my punishment wasn't prison. It was living every day knowing what I lost. You were the light, Grace, and I turned away from it. I was blinded by greed, by fear, by pride. I thought power made me strong, but it only made me empty. I heard you built something new. Evan Global. The Hope Project. They say you're helping women rise again. I'm proud of you. You did what I never could. You turned pain into purpose. If I could take it back, I would. Not for me, but for the man who used to believe in love before it became a weapon. Tell Evan his father wasn't always a monster. Tell him I loved him, even when I didn't know how. If you can't forgive me, I understand. But please don't hate me forever. Goodbye, Grace. Thank you for teaching me what love truly costs. Asterisk, asterisk." The words blurred as tears filled her eyes. Her chest rose and fell in quiet, broken sobs. Evan looked up, curious. "Mommy, are you sad?" Grace wiped her cheeks quickly and forced a smile. "No, sweetheart, just remembering." He climbed into her lap, wrapping small arms around her neck. "Daddy's in heaven now, right?" She nodded slowly. "Yes, baby, and I think he finally found peace." Adrian walked in then, pausing at the doorway. "Grace?" She handed him the letter. He read it silently, his expression softening. When he finished, he placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You don't owe the past anything, but it's all right to let it go." She nodded, folding the letter carefully and placing it in a small box beside Evan's baby photos. I'm not keeping it for him, she whispered. I'm keeping it for our son to remind him that even broken people can change. Adrian kissed her forehead. That's what makes you extraordinary. Grace looked toward the ocean, the sun glinting on the waves. No, Adrian, she said softly. It just makes me human. And as the sea carried the wind of forgiveness across the shore, Grace finally closed the last chapter of her past with love, not hatred. 10 years later, the sea still whispered outside the Bennett villa, carrying the same rhythm that had once healed Grace's broken heart. Time had softened everything, the pain, the memories, even the sharp edges of loss. Evan was 12 now, tall for his age, curious and full of life. He had his mother's kindness and Adrian's steadiness. That morning, he ran across the sand with his surfboard while Grace watched from the porch, coffee in hand, her eyes bright with peace. Adrian joined her, his hair silvered by time, but his smile unchanged. He's getting good, he said, watching Evan paddle into the waves. Grace nodded proudly. He's fearless. Just like you, Adrian chuckled. Just like his mother. They shared a quiet smile, the kind that came from years of unspoken understanding. Life had become beautifully ordinary. The foundation had expanded to 3 countries. Grace was now one of the most respected voices in women's leadership. And Adrian had stepped away from business entirely, choosing a simpler life, one centered around family, not fortune. Do you ever miss it? Grace asked softly. What? The meetings, the boardrooms, the sleepless nights? He laughed. No. This is better. This is real. She reached for his hand, their fingers intertwining. We really made it, didn't we? He squeezed gently. You did. I just walked beside you. The sound of Evan's laughter drifted up from the shore. Grace watched him, her heart swelling. He doesn't remember much about the darkness, she said quietly. And I'm glad. He deserves only light. Adrian nodded. You gave him that. Later that afternoon, Evan came running up, dripping wet, grinning wide. Mom, Dad, did you see that wave? Grace laughed. We did, champ. You were amazing. Evan plopped down beside them. When I grow up, I want to help people too, like you guys. Maybe I'll build something even bigger than Evan Global. Adrian ruffled his hair. You already will, son. You have something we never had at your age, a good heart from the very start. As the sun began to set, the 3 of them sat together on the porch, watching the sky burn orange and gold. Grace leaned against Adrian's shoulder, whispering, Do you think people ever really escape their past? He looked at her for a moment before answering. No, we don't escape it. We learn to live with it, to turn it into something that teaches us instead of tortures us. Grace smiled faintly. Then I guess we learned well. A soft breeze carried the scent of salt and lavender through the air. The ocean shimmered like liquid light. Grace stood, taking one last look at the horizon. Adrian rose beside her, his arm wrapping around her waist. And love, he added. Real love. The kind that rebuilds. Evan ran ahead toward the waves, shouting with joy. Grace watched him go, eyes glistening. He's our legacy, she whispered. Proof that love can bloom, even after ruin. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in twilight. And as the waves rolled endlessly across the shore, Grace smiled, the same smile that had once survived betrayal, pain, and loss. Because this wasn't the end of her story. It was the beginning of forever. So that's how our story ends. Or maybe, how healing begins. You're still here, my friend, aren't you? If you've made it to this moment, something in Grace's journey must have touched your heart. Maybe it reminded you that pain doesn't have to define you, it can refine you. Like the Stoics said, what stands in the way becomes the way. Grace's scars became her strength. Her betrayal became her rebirth, and that's something we can all learn from. Life will test you, people will hurt you, but the power to rise again always lives within you. So, whatever storm you're in right now, remember this too will pass, and you'll stand stronger for it. If this story moved you even a little, give it a like. share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to our channel. Because here, we believe in healing, in second chances, and in you.